All right, hello. So we're gonna wait for a couple of folks to join us. I think I've got all the lights on, but we're gonna wait for some folks. Oh, let me make sure George is in the shot there. So we're gonna wait for some folks to join us before we get started. Again, making sure good old George is there in the background, so you're not just staring at me. Again, we've only got a couple of people in, so we'll wait for some more folks to join us before we wander around the museum. And if no one else joins us, then it's going to be a close to private tour of the museum. Hello. Hal, nice to see you. Nice to have you guys with us today. Yeah, sure. No, thank you for sharing it on your Twitter. So hopefully we'll get a chance to see some of the really cool objects that we have in the museum. So if we only get a couple of people, that's totally fine. We're going to totally have a good time no matter what. So hey, we got a third one. That's still pretty good. So I'll go ahead and kind of get started. I don't want to go too much into the museum itself until we get, oh good, we got plenty of people coming. All right, just want to make sure that I'm not going ahead and jumping the gun before people join us for the Periscope. So welcome everybody. So my name is Vanessa Smiley. I'm one of the park rangers here at Morristown National Historical Park. And we are here at Washington's headquarters museum in Morristown, New Jersey. And this building has a pretty cool history in and of itself. It's built in the 1930s as part of the New Deal. There's the word. Hello, West Coast. Thanks for joining us. So I know it sounds kind of odd to be like, hey, let's do a live broadcast at the museum, but I think it's going to be pretty cool because I want to show you guys some of the really neat artifacts that I like. And then hopefully you will like them too. And then if there's something you see that I don't stop at, let me know. So let's see. Let's get started with the fact that I've got a bust behind me. That's George. Let me see if I can get it good here. Let me turn the camera around. There we go. So there's George. So this bust of George was yes, I can say hola. Unfortunately, I don't know too much Spanish. I can say hola and yo no sé. So hello and I don't know. At some point, hopefully, I will learn some more Spanish. Unfortunately, my mom made me take 5 years of French in college and high school. So why does he look Roman? Great question. So this bust initially was created based off of a life mask of George Washington. And the reason he looks Roman is it was kind of a fashion to have these busts be created to make our founding fathers, our political leaders, create this kind of emperor ideal or this Romanesque ideal. So it's really interesting in terms of an architectural or a sculpture design. So I'm gonna take you guys, continue, so hopefully this isn't too shaky. So we're gonna first go into the military gallery. We have 3 galleries here at the museum, and I wanna show you some really cool pieces that I like in the museum, and then if you see something you like that looks pretty cool, I'll stop and take a look at it. First, they're here. We'll look at George first. This is George Washington, and hopefully, unfortunately, the light is a little bit dimmer in here than I would like for this, but that's because we're in a museum and we try to keep the lights, even though they're LED lights, we try to keep the lights fairly low to help protect the objects and keep them preserved as best as possible. So this is a portrait of George Washington. It's when he's fairly younger, so this is a Charles Willson Peale, for those of you who are portrait nerds. This is done by Peale. It's dated to about 1772. And this is supposed to be around the time just before the American Revolution. So it's a fairly neat portrait. Shows a more younger George Washington as opposed to the gray-haired one we're kind of used to seeing in some of the portraits and everything. Probably the coolest thing that's with George, though, is going to be this sword. So this was George Washington's inaugural sword. He owned probably about a dozen swords, but this sword is the one that he wore when he was inaugurated as president in 1789. So it's, even though he owned a number of swords, this one in particular was worn the day he was inaugurated as president. Oh, good, I got the light a little bit better. So that's a pretty cool piece that we have in our collection. We also have a suit that he wore for his, I believe it's his second inaugural inauguration, a suit he wore that day. Unfortunately, it is in too poor of a condition to have on display, so it is in our collection storage. When did what stop? When did it stop being on display? Oh, many years ago. It's been in fairly poor condition for quite a while, and the reason for that is fabric is really difficult to maintain and preserve. It has to pretty much be from the moment it's done being worn. It has to pretty much be in a climate-controlled environment in order to last as long as that particular piece has lasted. So it's in a poor condition, but I think we have pictures of it somewhere from when it was brought out of its box. I think the last time was about 10 years ago, and I think they took some pictures of it. So I'll see if I can track down some pictures. Ooh, storage of the storage artifacts. Yeah, that's a great idea. I think I will beg our curatorial staff to let me up there, and I have a feeling they will happily say yes. One of the things that's really great about our museum storage is that we have a fair number of collections that don't relate to the American Revolution, and I can touch a little bit on that at some point, but that's a great idea. I'm going to look into doing that. Thank you. All right, so let's move away from George. So this is I think is a pretty cool piece, and it's fairly unique. So this is a chain link, I believe one of two that still exist. This is a chain link that was used, it was one of about 100 in a chain that stretched 1,500 feet across the Hudson River. So in an effort to prevent British ships from using the Hudson River during the American Revolution, the Continental soldiers devised a plan to thwart the passage of ships by stretching this iron chain across the river, and it was fairly decently successful at doing that. So you can see there that this is one of the original chains from that link. Yeah, if you can think that that's one chain of 800, pretty impressive. It weighs about 100 pounds, this particular link. So, yeah, incredibly impressive to see. We call this the West Point chain link because that was essentially, it was manufactured, or installed rather, is near West Point. Yeah, defense tactics. Yep, exactly. So we're going to bypass some of these cannons because I want to show you this cannon. So I'm going to see if I can get a good enough shot of the engraving on that. So if you guys can kind of see that there. Hopefully for anybody who's an American Revolution nerd, that is the crest of George, King George of Britain. Where's the other one? There it is. There's another one. Hopefully you can see that a little bit. And then there's another one up here that's a little bit tougher to see. We have photos on our Facebook page of this cannon tube. So to tell you about this field cannon, and let me get up close so you get you a good shot of that while I'm talking. So this is one of several that was captured at the captured from the British at the Battle of Princeton on January 3rd, 1777. So, you know, with artillery and arms in short supply, oh, I got that little glare, there we go. With artillery and arms in short supply, the victory at Princeton really boosted the morale of the Patriots, but it also bolstered their artillery because they were able to capture some of these cannons. And this is one of those cannons that was captured that we have here in our collection. So that's kind of a really, really cool piece that we have on display. So let me turn then this way for those of you who are still with us. If you happen to see this post or hear about this from our previous Twitter post, hopefully you'll recognize this picture. I took a face swap selfie with this guy right here. This is King George III. Until we basically declared our independence in 1776, King George was the reigning monarch, and he was the reigning monarch of Britain, and of course the colonies as part of the British Empire. He was our king until we declared our independence. So this particular portrait rather, was done somewhere between 1781 and 1797. It's a pretty old piece, and it's one of many portraits that we have in our collection, but one of the few that's on display. So that is what we kind of call our military gallery. I do want to show you, so I'm going to show you the slight behind the scenes. It's going to be a little bit dark, but this is, you can see, not a completed portion of our exhibit, and that is because we are still somewhat under construction because we have a new exhibit that is being installed in the lower level of the museum, as well as finishing up and expanding some of the exhibits that we currently have. Excuse me. And that is taking place this year. Hopefully we're going to be opening that at the beginning of 2017, hopefully April. So if you come visit the museum, you will see we have a slight mess, but as you can see, we're in the progress of installing new stuff. So now I'm going to walk through the museum here so you can see a little bit of the architecture of the building as I'm walking through. Like I said, this is a building that was built in the 1930s, and it was built by, or rather it was designed by a man named Pope, and he designed it to be similar to Washington's Mount Vernon. Of course, it doesn't look quite like Washington's Mount Vernon, but it's fairly close if you compare the two side by side. So the first piece, what we have just entered into is our kind of lifeways gallery, our material culture gallery. So less the military, more the civilian. And this right here, let's see if I can get it to, there we go. All right. I'll try not to get myself in the background there. So this is a pretty well-known portrait of George Washington. There are several copies or several, I guess, versions of this. So this is a Gilbert Stuart painting. So Gilbert Stuart was a pretty well-known painter, and he painted three three portraits of George Washington from life. And he made probably 100 or more likenesses that he copied from those original life portraits. So this portrait is a version of one of those copies. And we actually have a little handout, there that we give out about Gilbert Stuart, George Washington, and this portrait. This is probably one of the best pieces in terms of George Washington pieces that we have. So it's a pretty unique piece. Now I'm going to move, let me see where my next thing is. So everybody seems to congregate when they visit the museum, seems to congregate around this piece. This is a bed cover, it's a quilt. And one of the dichotomies that comes with, let me fix that so we get a little bit lighter, there we go. One of the interesting things that this particular piece of the exhibit really highlights is the fact that sewing, so all of the details, let me get up close. I don't want to get too close because, as you can see, please do not touch. And even though I am taking over the museum with this Periscope broadcast, I don't want to get in trouble with our cultural resources. So you can see, here we go. Let's get a little, there, perfect. So you can see this is all hand done, hand sewn. And it really was quite a labor to complete this. So to give you kind of an idea about how labor intensive this can be, sewing, for instance, a shirt, a simple like linen shirt, would take hours and hours of sewing to do. Now, of course, if you were really good at sewing, it might not take you quite as long. But if you can imagine a simple shirt taking hours, imagine the labor that it would take. Let's see if we can get in on another detail. Imagine the labor that it would take to sew something like a bed skirt. And so really the only people who had these really fancy bed skirts might have been those who were more wealthy. Now, of course, if you had one that was made by your, grandmother and passed down for the ages, you might be able to have something this nice, but not necessarily be that wealthy. But this has some really amazing attention to detail, as was already stated. But yeah, very, very, very intricate, and really a big statement piece because of its size. And this is only a part of it. How long would this take? Ooh, let me see if I can cheat and look at the, see if it would. No, I can't even cheat and look at the label to find out how long it would take. This would take, probably because it's all hand sewn, my estimation would be it would take months. Now you have to imagine that if somebody's working on this, they were not doing their other chores around the house or tasks. So if it was somebody's job to create this, maybe they would get really good at making this, and so they'd be a lot quicker. Oh, let me get it lighted up there. But it would take quite a long time. The sewing machine isn't invented until the mid-19th century. So here we are, this piece in particular. Let me check the date because I don't know off the top of my head. This was in the late 18th century. Yeah, so one of the things that was fairly common is patchworking this quilt. So most likely, if it was a group of people, carpal tunnel big time, yeah. If it was a group of people working on this, say a couple of family members or a sewing group, most likely what they would do is, and I'm not going to touch it, but most likely what they would do is work on a section. So one woman might work on this section here and really embroider and get into the detail of this particular section. And then maybe another person would work on this. Or if it was one person working on it, they'd do piece by piece by piece. So you can kind of see the little squares. They would work on those pieces individually and then put it all together. So right, it could very well have been a group putting these pieces together. But again, fairly labor intensive, kind of a labor of love. But we get the benefit of being able to really admire their handiwork here in this part of the museum. So I know this Periscope, this broadcast is not, is this piece significant in some way? It's just an example of the time. It really isn't something that we have a lot of detail about, but it's really just an example. And the fact that this has lasted or has been very well preserved since the late 18th century is pretty remarkable. You can even see where some of the fabrics have faded. And that just comes from wear and tear over time. So just an example, no particular important provenance with it, except for the fact that it's just a really fine example of some quilt work from that time period. So I know, again, Periscope is not just about me. It is about the objects and what you guys are interested in seeing. But my favorite thing in the whole museum, and unfortunately because of the way it's designed, I can't get too close. But these are, we call them the calendar girls. I'm going to try to keep that steady as best as I can. So what this is, excuse me. What this is called the 12 months. And these were probably done in the, I think we have a date of, I'm going to read the label. I'm going to cheat. 1745 by Thomas Buford. And why are the corners? Oh, you're talking about the quilt. That is because, I'm going to spin around. The corners are like that because that would be where the corner of the bed was. You don't need anything to drape over the corner of the bed. That's just kind of wasted space. Whereas this piece right here would drape at the end of the bed, and this right here would drape at the bedposts. Yeah, that's probably a much simpler way to say it. Bedposts to get around that. But as I was saying about the calendar girls, oh, that's much better lighting actually. These are representations. They're about mid 18th century. They are representing English fashions that wealthy American women would possibly be wearing throughout the season. So, and again, I can't get too close. There's only so much that I can do. But as you can see, we've got January in the upper left, and it goes on through the months there. And this is one of my favorite pieces. I'm going to see if I can try to get the light a little bit better. I don't think I can get it any better, but these are some of my favorite pieces. Let me see if I can reach. Our Chief of Cultural Resources might not appreciate me getting too close, but I'm not touching anything. So there is December, and this is a typical high-end wealthy fashion that women would have been wearing most likely in December. But those are our calendar girls, and they're probably my favorite thing in here, the calendar girls there. So somebody had asked about, some objects of importance, who may have owned, who's important, who may have owned something. Well, I'm going to put up something. Here we go. These slippers, or rather, shoes, but definitely we call them slippers. Women's white slippers. These are dress shoes that were most likely worn by Martha Washington, so George Washington's wife. And the provenance attached to them is they were given to her dressmakers, Kitty and Nancy Sheets. but these were worn by Martha. Don't know when, don't know where, but this is an object that's directly connected to the Washingtons. Let's see if I can get a side shot on those. See if we can get a shot of the heel there. What size shoe was she? Well, they look big, so let me see if I can put my hand up right up next to the glass, so you can kind of get a size based on that. I would say on our modern sizing, these are probably a size maybe 6. Maybe a size 6 is what I'm guessing. I'm a size 9, and my feet would never fit in this. So I'm going to estimate that these are about a size 6 in today's modern sizing. I think they just look really big from the video, but here you can see again my hand up against them. And I have kind of tiny hands, so you can kind of see how small they are. Yeah, fairly tiny. So that's just if we were looking at something in particular that was belonging to one of the Washingtons. So now I'm going to maneuver over here. We have a piece in our collection that is going to be, yeah, fairly narrow. Yeah, my wide feet wouldn't fit in that. Fairly narrow feet. We have some items here. So here, let me see if I can do this. There we go. So this is a logbook. And the reason I'm pointing out this logbook is because this was a logbook owned by George Washington, and that's his handwriting there. This was a farmer's logbook. So this is where he kept reports on livestock, crops, maintenance, things, and expenses. And this object is actually not going to be with us for about 6 months. Starting in September, it is going to go down to Mount Vernon, because one of the things that are on one of the pages of this particular logbook is, for those of you who may or may not know, George Washington had a slave named Hercules, who is fairly well-known, a well-known one of Washington's slaves. Mount Vernon is doing a museum exhibit on George Washington and slavery. And they're doing an exhibit, or a piece of their exhibit, about Hercules. And on one of these pages in this logbook, it's not this one, we don't have this one turned to it. One of the pages writes where George Washington, it's where George Washington wrote that Hercules absconded, which is it's pretty cool. So we're going to send this logbook to Mount Vernon, and they are going to display it for about 6 months, I think, as part of that museum piece. So in the meantime, we're going to put something else in its place. But that's why I wanted to point out this logbook, is that it's going to be traveling to Mount Vernon for the winter. It's going to winter at Mount Vernon this year. So fairly cool opportunity to share with some other museums. And there's one other gallery, and we're going to make our way before we finish up. And it's a gallery that, if you like old documents, this is the gallery for you. So we're going to go down. And because it's a bunch of old documents, it might be difficult to see. So I unfortunately won't be able to spend too much time in there, but I took a photo with myself earlier to promote this particular Periscope. And this is where we have lots of 18th century documents on display. We have a fair number of really cool pieces. And if you were curious about museum storage areas, there's one of them. So this is where we have some large, and unfortunately it's dark, this is where we have some large furniture storage. We have no other room to put it, so it gets displayed here, and at some point we'll probably have some information about what's stored there. So the piece that I want to show you as we end our Periscope is this piece that I took a photo with earlier today. This is an original edition of Thomas Paine's Common Sense. And we even have a portrait of Thomas Paine. There he is, right there. This was donated to the park by the person we're naming the gallery after, Lloyd W. Smith, donated to the park, who collected a fair amount of original documents from the American Revolution as well as other American history time periods. But it's pretty cool to see an original edition of Thomas Paine's Common Sense. And you can see see if I can get it. So there we go. We have an amazing security system that actually just got new security cameras installed. Yes, it is in fantastic condition, but this is probably one of my favorite pieces here in this particular exhibit. So I wanted to make sure I showed you guys that. Again, there are so many documents here. I'm going to span around a little bit. So many documents that we could spend an entire Periscope on the documents alone, and there's a bunch of them. But I don't want to spend too much time because I've taken up enough of your time already. But and there we go. Yeah, I remember having to read Thomas Paine's Common Sense. So like seeing that little document here in this museum, it's kind of one of those, oh my gosh, that's the real document. That's so cool. That's the real manuscript. It's awesome. There's so much you can see though in this museum. You just have to take a moment if you're here to poke around and see all the different objects that we have. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. So I'm going to take that suggestion about doing a kind of behind the scenes in the storage, in the archives, in the collection storage, to see what other sort of objects we can have out. In fact, as soon as I'm done here, I'm going to send an email to our Chief of Cultural Resources and our museum staff and see if that's something they can accommodate. And I think that they will. Of course, thank you for sticking around. If you need to visit anytime, come on down. Happy to show you guys around. I'm not an expert at anything. I don't claim to be, but I love showing people some of the really neat stuff we have in our exhibits, and also maybe some other stuff that we might have that's not on display. So thank you guys so much. Hope you enjoyed the video. Happy National Park Week. Go out, find your park no matter where it is. There's always a park somewhere in your backyard. So thank you guys very much, and I will catch you guys next time.